June 13, 1944. The fields of Normandy, France. From the dense cover of the trees, the world is nothing but a narrow slit of vision and the low rumble of a 23-liter V12 engine. But another sound is growing, a mechanical roar that doesn't belong to them. Peering through the foliage, the crew of a single German Tiger tank watches as a serpent of steel slithers down the road just 200 meters away. It's the British 22nd Armored Brigade, a column of over 130 tanks and armored vehicles, rolling confidently towards the city of Cannes. They are completely oblivious. Inside the turret, their commander, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann, faces an impossible choice. His company is scattered, and he has only one operational tank, his own. The rules of engagement say to stay hidden, to survive. But survival wasn't what made men into legends. A split-second decision was made, one that would turn this quiet French road into history. With a lurch, the 57-ton Tiger tank broke from the tree line. The attack was as swift as it was brutal. Wittmann's gunner fired on the move, first knocking out 2 tanks from the right of the column, then 1 from the left. With the column now trapped, Wittmann drove down the road alongside the enemy, blasting armored carriers and tanks that were so surprised their crews simply jumped out and fled. He plunged straight into the town of Villers-Bocage, continuing his single-handed assault until his own tank was disabled by an anti-tank gun. The Rampage had lasted barely 15 minutes. In that time, Wittmann had personally destroyed 21 Allied tanks and devastated an entire enemy regiment. This one act single-handedly halted the British advance, adding enormously to the mystique of his abilities. This action would make Michael Wittmann the most famous tank ace in the world. But the story of that legend was not just written in the fields of France. It was carefully crafted in Berlin. To understand the man who commanded that Tiger, you have to travel back from the blood-soaked fields of Normandy to the quiet farmland of Bavaria. The story of Michael Wittmann doesn't begin in a crucible of steel and fire, but on a farm south of Nuremberg, where he was born in 1914. He was a country boy, living the healthy outdoor life shaped by the rhythms of the seasons, not the cadence of war. His path was, at first, entirely ordinary. Like all young men in Adolf Hitler's Germany, he was drafted into the army for compulsory service. He served his time and could have easily returned to the familiar world he knew. But the Germany of the 1930s was a nation crackling with a new, intoxicating energy. For a disciplined and motivated young man, the quiet life on the farm was no longer enough. A different path was calling, one that promised prestige, power, and a place in building a new future for Germany. In 1937, at age 23, Michael Wittmann made the choice that would define the rest of his life. He eagerly volunteered for Hitler's personal bodyguard, the Leibstandard SS Adolf Hitler. This was not just another military unit, it was the absolute elite of the new Germany. Entry was reserved for hand-picked personnel who met strict height and physical fitness requirements, men who had a certain look. For a young man in his early 20s, the appeal of the smart black uniforms and the prestige of the honor guard was immense. But joining the Leibstandard was more than a career choice. It was an ideological commitment. This was a unit for true believers, and Wittmann was not only a volunteer but was politically indoctrinated to be a part of it. The vow he took was not to a flag or a country, but to a single man. Standing in formation, he swore the oath. I swear to the Adolf Hitler loyalty and bravery. I vow to the obedience unto death. The quiet country boy was gone. In his place stood a soldier whose loyalty and life now belonged completely to the Führer. In June 1941, the parades were over. As 3 million German soldiers plunged into the Soviet Union under the codename Operation Barbarossa, Wittmann was at the forefront of the fighting. He was not yet in a Tiger, but in command of a StuG III, a turretless assault gun designed to support infantry, not to fight other tanks. During a reconnaissance mission, he spotted 2 groups of Soviet T-34 tanks, 18 in total, heading directly for his position. The T-34 had been a shock to the Germans. It was heavily armored and better than anything they could field. Wittmann's orders were explicit. He was not to engage the enemy tanks. But in that moment, the aggressive, tactical mind that would later make him a legend took over. Wittmann disobeyed his orders and attacked the T-34s. Knowing a direct fight was suicide, he set up an ambush, using his vehicle's low profile to hide before opening fire at close range. In just a few minutes, his single assault gun had destroyed 6 of the formidable Soviet tanks, stopping the enemy armored attack cold. This single act of brilliant insubordination revealed the core traits of the man: aggression, tactical genius, and a willingness to break any rule to win. His exploits in the Sturmgeschütz did not go unnoticed. Impressed by his raw talent and aggression, Wittmann's commanders sent him back to Germany to train to become an officer of the SS. After graduating as an SS second lieutenant, he was introduced to Germany's newest weapon, a machine that was already a legend in its own right, the Panzer VI, the Tiger. In February 1943, Wittmann and his new Tiger were called back to the Russian front. 5 months later, on July 5th, he found himself at the spearhead of Operation Citadel, what would become the largest tank battle in human history. As the attack began at dawn, the Tiger crews were met by a relentless storm of fire. The Russians had prepared line after line of defenses, with hundreds of T-34 tanks dug into the earth, waiting. It was a hellish landscape designed to swallow armored divisions whole. But this was the battlefield the Tiger was built for. While Russian shells bounced harmlessly off its thick hide, Wittmann's 88mm gun began to systematically dismantle the Soviet defenses. He kept his tank moving, smashing one T-34 after another. By the end of this first day of battle, Wittmann and his elite crew had knocked out 8 tanks and 12 anti-tank guns. A key reason for this staggering success was their mastery of a difficult and forbidden technique, firing while on the move. German regulations stressed that tanks should not fire when moving, calling it a waste of ammunition, but Wittmann's crew had perfected it, turning their Tiger into a mobile killing machine. The promise of the man and the superweapon was being fulfilled. Over the entire Citadel offensive, Wittmann's Tiger Company had a series of fine successes, destroying a staggering 151 enemy tanks. From a purely tactical perspective, it was a masterclass in armored warfare. But these stunning numbers hid a devastating truth. Despite the prowess of the Tiger units, the ferocious Russian defenses had completely stopped Hitler's offensive. Germany had lost the decisive tank battle on the Eastern Front. This was the turning point. The Great War of Conquest was over. The desperate war for survival had begun. From this moment on, the German army would be in a full and bloody retreat back towards Berlin. Wittmann's incredible personal victories were now just heroic footnotes in the story of a catastrophic defeat, his legend growing even as the empire he fought for began to die. As the German army fell back across the vast, frozen Ukrainian landscape, Wittmann's Tiger unit was used as a mobile fire brigade. They were rushed from one collapsing sector to the next to plug gaps and blunt the relentless Soviet advance. In this desperate environment, Wittmann developed his signature tactic, a dangerous game where he used himself and his tank as bait. He would drive his Tiger onto high ground, deliberately tempting hidden Russian anti-tank gunners to fire at him. Once they took the bait and revealed their positions, the rest of his tanks would race in from their blind spots and destroy them. The risks were astronomical. After one such engagement, his crew counted a total of 28 hits on their Tiger, some leaving holes big enough to put a fist into. But the tactic worked. Over the next few weeks, Wittmann went on a rampage, knocking out 61 enemy tanks and bringing his total to 117. These were the stories that would echo back to Germany. Tales of a lone, invincible warrior holding back the tide, a perfect hero for a nation that desperately needed one. The stories of the invincible Tiger commander did not just inspire the troops. They reached the highest levels of power in Berlin. On January 16, 1944, Michael Wittmann was awarded the Knight's Cross, one of Nazi Germany's highest military honors. But the propaganda machine was just getting started. Just a few weeks later, his award was upgraded with oak leaves, and he was summoned to the Führer's Eastern Front headquarters to receive the commendation from Adolf Hitler himself. This was the pivotal moment. His incredible kill count was a factor, but his rapid elevation was also political. One of the primary reasons Wittmann was decorated to such a degree was his membership in the Leibstandard SS Adolf Hitler, the Führer's own division. He was the perfect soldier from the perfect unit, the ideal Aryan hero. The state had found its poster boy, and the process of transforming Michael Wittmann from a soldier into a national icon had officially begun. Wittmann was now a national hero, but the country he returned to was in ruins, a result of Allied bombing. His new mission wasn't on the battlefield. It was on the home front, where he was used as propaganda to boost sagging morale. He was sent on a triumphal tour, visiting the Henschel factory where the Tiger was made to deliver a speech to the workers. His personal life became a public spectacle. His marriage to 19-year-old Hildegard Burmester was a celebrated event. The quiet soldier had been fully transformed into a public voice for the regime's message of total war. The sight of such senseless destruction of our cities is enough to make one's heart bleed, he declared. The Anglo-Americans have taught us to hate. We have only one watchword, and that is revenge. The myth was now in action, a tool deployed to inspire workers and sell a failing war to a weary populace. While Wittmann was being celebrated on the home front, the war entered its final, bloody chapter. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces landed in Normandy. Hitler ordered his panzer forces forces to drive them back into the sea, and Wittmann's 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion was sent to the front. The unit started its journey with a full complement of 45 Tiger tanks. But the 200-kilometer trip to the battlefield was a disaster. Allied air power now owned the skies. For 5 harrowing days, the column was subjected to unrelenting attacks by fighter bombers that decimated their forces. By the time they arrived, the company had been effectively destroyed without firing a shot in anger. Of the 45 Tigers that started the journey, only about 6 vehicles were still serviceable. This was the new reality of the war, overwhelming Allied superiority. Any action Wittmann took now would be one of sheer desperation. And so we return to that moment in the trees near Villers-Bocage. But now we understand. We know the man, the myth he had become, and the sheer desperation that fueled what came next. In his own words, the choice was agonizing. The decision to attack was a very difficult one, but I knew it absolutely had to be. With his company scattered, he acted alone. I had no time to assemble my company. I set off with 1 tank. He burst from the tree line, surprising the British as much as they had surprised him. I first knocked out 2 tanks from the right of the column, then 1 from the left. With the column trapped, he began a methodical rampage down the road, attacking the armored troop carriers whose crews were so shocked they simply jumped out and fled. He knocked out every tank that tried to fight back, throwing the entire regiment into total confusion. Then, in a final act of unbelievable audacity, he drove straight into the enemy-occupied town. This was the perfect moment, the absolute pinnacle of his legend. The myth made real. Wittmann's rampage ended when an anti-tank gun disabled his Tiger in the town center, forcing him to abandon it. But the legend was now fully forged. German newsreels made the most of the Allied setback at Villers-Bocage, transforming the chaotic battle into a story of singular heroism. Wittmann was celebrated by his commander, Sepp Dietrich, who immediately recommended him for yet another commendation. In July, he was once again summoned to meet the Führer. There, Adolf Hitler personally decorated him, adding 2 swords to his Knight's Cross with oak leaves. This made him the most decorated tank commander in the German army. This was the absolute peak of the myth. In a nation now facing total defeat, Michael Wittmann had become more than a man. He was the living embodiment of the invincible SS warrior, a final, desperate symbol of hope for a dying regime. But the fame of one man could not stop an army. 2 months after the triumph at Villers-Bocage, Hitler's army in Normandy was headed for total destruction. The tone of the war had shifted from defiance to doom. On August 8, 1944, the Allies launched a decisive punch codenamed Operation Totalize. A massive force of British and Canadian armor, numbering 300 tanks, smashed through the German lines. In their path stood the battered remnants of the 12th SS Panzer Division, and with them, Captain Michael Wittmann and a small group of Tiger tanks. Their commander, Colonel Kurt Meyer, gave the only order their doctrine allowed, an immediate counterattack. It was a move born of pure desperation, an action later described as almost suicidal for the Germans to mount. The time for tactical victories was over. The war was lost. All that was left were heroic gestures in the face of the inevitable end. As the acting battalion commander, Wittmann was supposed to be in reserve, but a legend cannot sit on the sidelines while his men ride into a suicide mission. He insisted on leading the attack himself. His commander, Kurt Meyer, later recalled, "Michael said to me, I must be in the attack myself, for the other officers can barely cope." Knowing the situation was hopeless, Meyer shook Wittmann's hand one last time. In a final, haunting moment, Michael Wittmann gave a youthful laugh and climbed into his Tiger. This was not a military calculation. It was the conscious fulfillment of a myth. A hero must lead from the front, especially at the end. And so, he set off on the attack, leading just 8 German tanks against a wall of 300 Allied ones. As Wittmann's Tiger advanced across the open ground, he was scanning for targets to his front, relying on the near invincibility that had saved him so many times before. But what Wittmann doesn't know is that a hidden danger is waiting for him on either side of the road. He was driving into a perfectly prepared kill zone. To his right, concealed within a small wood, British tanks of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry are lying in wait. And to his left, hidden from view behind a long chateau wall, are the Canadian tanks of the Sherbrooke Fusiliers. But the Allies didn't just have the element of surprise. They had a new weapon, a dedicated Tiger killer, the Sherman Firefly. This was a standard Sherman tank, but it was upgunned with a powerful 17-pounder cannon, a gun able to penetrate 130 millimeters of steel, enough for even the thickest armor on a Tiger. The technological superiority that was so central to Wittmann's legend was about to be shattered. As one Allied tanker realized, for the first time, we now had a tank which was equal to the Tiger, the trap was sprung. A Canadian gunner from the Sherbrooke Fusiliers recalled the order from his commander. "We'll wait till they get to about 800 yards. As they pulled out from behind their wall of cover, the quiet field erupted. The German attack was shattered almost instantly. 3 of the 4 Tigers were knocked out, leaving Wittmann's tank to push on alone, now taking fire from both the Canadians on his left and the British on his right. A fellow German tanker watched the final, horrifying moments from a distance. When I got to within 300 meters of Michael's Tiger, flames suddenly shot from the tank. Caught in a fatal crossfire, the Tiger was hit again and again. An eyewitness remembered what happened next. A tremendous explosion, and seeing the turret hit the ground. The force of the detonation blew the Tiger's massive 11-ton turret completely off the hull, which then crashed to the earth. The Black Baron, the most famous tank ace of the Third Reich, was dead. Michael Wittmann was, without question, a master of his craft, a disciplined, aggressive, and lethally effective tank commander. But his enduring fame, the reason his name is remembered while thousands of others are not, comes from something more. He was the perfect hero for a regime that desperately needed one, and the myth they built around him became his true legacy. You can see the power of that myth today. At the Lockham German Military Cemetery in Normandy, among 21,000 unadorned graves, there is one man's grave that is always honored with fresh flowers. It's a testament to a legend so powerful it still resonates. Even decades after his death, his legacy and mystique maintain. The myth created by the Third Reich was so enduring that it has, for many, almost completely overshadowed the quiet country boy who became its instrument.